Welcome to the Immigration Lawyers Podcast. I am the host, Attorney John Khosravi, and I practice U.S. immigration law exclusively. For more information about the program, please visit www.immigrationlawyerspodcast.com. Please note that this recording is informational only and does not constitute legal advice. Please consult with a licensed attorney for specific legal guidance that suits your case. Also, this recording is copyrighted and written permission is required for rebroadcasting. For more information about me, please visit www.jqqlaw.com. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining the Immigration Lawyers Podcast. I have a fun episode today with David Wilks. David is not only a fellow immigration lawyer, but he's also a podcaster. And we reached out and got to know each other really well. And he's a good guy. So I want to have him aboard on the show to get to know him better, what he's doing, how he got involved with, podcasting, all this kind of stuff. But to start, David, can you tell us about your background, where you grew up and how you became an immigration attorney?
Sure. Yeah, that's a long story, but I'm happy to share it. So I grew up, I was born in the Bay Area of California, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So my dad had a job in San Francisco, and we were there until I was about 10. And then he took a job in Albany, New York in the middle of winter. So it was the first time I'd really even experienced snow. I think maybe I'd gone to some, mountain when I was like 4.
Yeah.
But it was the first time I'd really experienced, and it was snowing as we got off the plane. And at that point, the Albany International Airport didn't yet have, I think they call it international, but it goes to Canada. But it didn't yet have those jetways. And so we went from SFO, which is one of the biggest airports in the world, to we're walking out onto the tarmac down these staircases in the snow. And I just remember, I felt like I was in this sort of like alien world. It was crazy. Our car was actually frozen when we got there. So
it's funny you say that. Sorry to interrupt. We had done an interview for your podcast yesterday. I told my story when I went to Iran. It was the exact same scenario. Sunny
That's
LA.
Right.
We went to winter Iran. It was frozen, and they didn't have the connectors to the airport. So they had to go down the stairs and get onto a bus. And it was just when you're saying, I'm like, wow, with the same thing. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So, from that point on, I was in upstate New York. I mean, I bounced around a little bit here and there. I lived in France for a couple of years.
Oh, wow.
But I came back to Cornell for law school. I went up to Rochester for my first job, and then I came down to Ithaca about 3 years ago. And it was actually at my old firm up in Rochester that I ended up starting in immigration. I actually started as a litigator. I thought that that's where I would want to be, but it turns out when you start in litigation, sometimes you end up in things that you didn't really dream of. I mean, you think you have these visions of television where you're in a courtroom and you're giving all these arguments. I was responsible for collections from nursing homes. So you can imagine how fun that is, right? Because when you're collecting, usually the family has just gone through a tragedy. So that makes you really feel good at night. So when they had this opportunity, they had basically one associate that was on medical leave and one associate that was on maternity leave in the immigration group. So they asked me to fill in for 3 months. And here we are, 8-9 years later. So it's been a nice long ride. And I think what's appealed to me most about immigration, I have lived internationally, so I know a little bit what it's like to be a fish out of water, but it's just really nice that when you win, nobody's losing. It's just really nice to have that experience where, what you're doing at the end of the day is really helping people and helping people achieve their dreams. And it's not at the expense of somebody else's success. And I really like that. It's something that allows me to really sort of broaden my horizons. You work with people from all over the world that do all sorts of different things. I've worked with squash coaches and doctors and just all sorts of various professions that, I now know what mitral valve regurgitation is, for example. Things that you would never know unless you were going to, medical school or whatever it is. It's just really, it's just intellectually stimulating, and it has this humanitarian bent that I just feel privileged. I feel lucky to be able to practice immigration.
Yeah, I feel you. It's so funny. So many immigration lawyers fell into it, just happened to become immigration lawyers because of some nuanced thing or some random thing, and fell in love with it. It's a big part of our practice area. They don't really sell it like that in law school. And I as a former vice chair of the law student committee, I was kind of trying to go to law schools for AILA and then get people involved and say, listen, like, this is a great area of law. not everyone thinks the humanitarian side, which is important, but there's all these other aspects to it, and we need more people, and there's a lot of business, but it's just not the same thing as corporate law or like stuff that's in the TV and the shows and stuff. But what took you to France in the first place? Was that during college?
Yeah, so it was after my freshman year. I was doing some volunteer work. It was a volunteer organization, so I was teaching some English and doing just things like that. And then I actually went back during law school. So I was over there for a couple of years in the South, but then I went back through Cornell has this great Paris program where you can study you can get to study a little bit at the Sorbonne and tour what's called the Cour de Cassation, which is basically one of their many Supreme Courts. And it's a very different system, but it's just awesome. And when I was in France, I loved not taking the metro. I loved just walking, even though it'd be like a 40-minute walk from my apartment to the school, because it's just history all around you. Me growing up in the suburbs, right? We have to take a car everywhere, right? So just being able to walk and really just sort of take that in, and again, just experience something outside of yourself is just awesome.
Yeah, you could be in Paris for years and walk down every street and still see new stuff that's been there for 50 years or 100 years or something. It's very fascinating. The city is just a lot. Did you study? I had a friend who did that, and they studied law in French there. Is that what you did as well?
No. So I could have, there's a program to do that, but I just, I studied comparative. It was Cornell, but in France, right? So all the courses were in English. There was this opportunity that if you wanted to, you could do sort of a 4-year program where you would get a European law degree in addition to your American law degree. But at that point, that wasn't really what I was looking to do. So no, it was taking comparative law. It was understanding the more code version of law as opposed to common law that that are in the more Anglophile legal systems. But it was fun. It was really fun, and you get to meet.
I regret not doing that. Yeah, I always regret not doing that. I always kept next semester. But if anyone's law student listening, do that. So when you got started, what were the first kind of immigration cases that you were handling?
So if I remember right, I believe I started with L1s and EB1B or EB12, or it's basically upstanding researchers. Everybody calls them something different. So L1 is the intercompany transfer, right? So, you 3 years abroad as a manager or executive or specialized knowledge and coming into the US to be manager, executive, or specialized knowledge. And then EB1B or outstanding researcher or EB12 or whatever you like to call it. That's where you have a list of 10 things to show that somebody that works either for a research organization or a university, that they are an outstanding researcher or professor. And you have to meet 2 of 10 evidentiary, I believe it's 10, but two evidentiary requirements. And then you also have to go further and show under what's called the Kazarian analysis that you not only met those criteria, but you did so in outstanding fashion, right? So you not only did it, but you did it with style, right? So that's a great thing.
It gives them out to deny the case if they want to.
That's right. But yeah, those are I think the most fun cases, to be quite honest. I love a lot of different types of cases, but those EB1 cases where you can really get in and really make an argument, and that's where you get to learn the most, I think, about what your clients are doing, and then you get to frame it in such a way that it's, I call them grandma letters, to be honest, because I say to clients, this is what your grandma would say about you to all of her friends, right? You should feel really good after reading an EB1 petition because it just says all of the best things about you that could ever be said. That's kind of fun to deliver to someone, right? you encapsulate their entire career and then you provide it to them and say, look how amazing you are. That's kind of a fun thing to do for people. So that's where I got started, and then it branched off into all sorts of different things. Obviously H-1B, O-1, labor certifications, doctor work. I do a lot with entrepreneurs now, but it all started with those.
What kind of visa categories are used for entrepreneurs?
All sorts, all
Like the
sorts.
O's and.
So it depends on the person.
Mhm.
So we work with, right now I'm working with an incubator that is a more prestigious school down in New York City. And so they attract, some incredible clients. So they can, for example, satisfy sometimes EB1A, which is extraordinary ability. There's a lot of national interest waivers that we'll do. They'll do O1s if they need to. But yeah, entrepreneurs are a very tricky
Yeah.
category, right? And actually, we're going to be talking about this on my podcast very soon. It's a tricky category because you have to maintain this employee-employer relationship in so many categories, right? So H-1B, which is the primary vehicle for most foreign nationals to get a professional visa, you need to have an employee-employer relationship. And so that will mean, essentially, to put it bluntly, that somebody has to be able to fire you.
Mhm.
And a lot of entrepreneurs don't want to give up that level of control in their company, right? So that takes a lot of trust to give someone that amount of control. So there's a business consideration, and then there's the immigration consideration. There's also the issues of control when it comes to permanent residence, because the primary method of getting permanent residence in business immigration is the labor certification. And so the thrust of the labor certification process is to do a test of the labor market, to do recruitment, to show that there is no available U.S. worker for a particular position. But if you have a controlling interest, or even any interest, where you're able to give direction to the people running that test of the labor market, the Department of Labor just simply won't trust that test of the labor market. So it makes it very, very difficult to get a labor certification through that process, right? We just actually, with Steve Allaire, who I think well, we talked about that yesterday. We just wrote an article on how BALCA, the appellate board that governs labor certifications, treats entrepreneurs in labor certifications. And the long and end of it is it's not well. They don't get treated particularly well because of this concern that the entrepreneur is going to control this test of the labor market, so that you can't trust that test of the labor market. So you do have to be creative, you have to be flexible, you have to be willing to try different things, and sometimes you have to wait. And sometimes you have to build up your resume, or sometimes you have to go start your company outside the US and then transfer yourself back into the US through, for example, the L or the EB1C. So it takes a lot of creativity, it takes some resilience, but entrepreneurs, they have that in spades. So that works out pretty well.
Yeah, luckily the matter of Donna Sarr did help out a lot when they changed the national interest waiver standards. That was the NISDOT was just horrible. But you mentioned this, and I don't do perm or H-1B, and I've always had a question about this, and I've asked people, they were confused as well. But with regards to ownership in the company by the beneficiary, is it absolutely zero ownership, or just some ownership is still doable as long as it's minority? So, okay.
So you can own, and in some cases, it sort of depends on the discretion of the adjudicator. You can have majority ownership sometimes. It just depends on how you've structured your company, right? So one thing you're going to want to really look at is for an independent board of directors.
Mm-hmm.
So is there somebody basically that can tell you no? And they're going to look through the bylaws. They're going to look through to see how the directors interact with each other, how the shareholders or members, whatever structure you happen to have in your company, interact with each other, because they want to see that basically that there is someone that can fire you. But you can certainly own part of the company for sure.
Okay, I was kind of worried some ownership will immediately be a red flag that's going to cause a denial in those kind of cases.
For the labor certification, it might be, right? So for the labor certification, it's a multi-factor test, right? And a lot of weight is put on the ownership interest, right? So when we were reading through these BALCA decisions, basically, if you had ownership interest and you had some say in the company, that tended to be a major red flag in the labor certification process. But for the H-1B, there is some flexibility. And you got to remember that there's other visa categories, such as the O1 or the TN, that also have prohibitions on self-employment. O1, if you have an agent, sure, you can work through that. But if you are working for a petitioning company, there's some restrictions there. But again, if you're able to be flexible and work with an independent board of directors, or really structure your company in a legitimate fashion, in a way that allows other people to have a legitimate employment of you, because that's really what they're looking for, is to see that you are really employed by the company. And if you're willing to give up some of that power in order to allow yourself to truly be an employee of the company, there are ways of making it work.
Yeah, it just sucks that people have to go through these kind of hoops, so they just want to be a doctor or be a business person here and add to it. And just the fact that they need us to do this stuff, that our role shouldn't exist to a large extent for a lot of these kind of high end kind of jobs in particular, where a person is like going to make a billion-dollar company almost, or multi-million-dollar company, and create so many jobs. And then they're like, in L1s, for example, just how you L1s have gotten horrendous, the decisions and the number of RFEs and what's in the RFEs. Have you been seeing that kind of stuff as well?
Well, so L1s, yes, there's always a concern. And I think the government has always been a little bit nervous about L1s because there's not the same wage protections that there are in the H-1B, right? Because you have to hit prevailing wage in H-1B. So I think that's why we tend to see more scrutiny on the L1s just from a policy standpoint. But with all of it, I think what I say to my clients, and you know, we go around, we talk to universities, and we do these talks about what it's going to be like after people graduate. And the one theme that I try to hit home with students of whatever level they are is that you need to set your priorities early, right? Because when you come into the United States, unfortunately, there are going to be sacrifices. And it's really a shame, like you say, because you know these people are creating amazing jobs. When you look at the companies in the United States that have been formed by immigrants, I mean, the numbers are astronomical, right? If you think about, you know, just the contribution that immigrants have given. You know, you think about the iPhone that was created by Johnny Ive. He was a foreign national. I don't know his immigration status now. You look at, you know, even the song, I believe "God Bless America" was written by Irving Berlin. I'm fairly certain, and Irving Berlin was an immigrant as well. I mean, these things that are endemic to our culture are thanks to immigrants. But what we require of immigrants as a society, rightly or wrongly, is sacrifice. And so when I talk to students, I tell them you really have to set your priorities. Is your goal to be in the United States no matter what? Or is your goal to get some great experience in the United States and then go somewhere else? Or is it somewhere in between? And once you set that goal, once you set that priority, it's going to make your immigration plan so much easier, right? Because maybe if your goal is to be in the United States no matter what, right? Maybe there's a concern about your safety back in your home country. So for example, if you're in the LGBTQ community, going home to some countries won't be safe, right? And so you want to live your life in the United States. And so that becomes very important to you. So that might mean, unfortunately, that you might not be able to take a job in, say, New York City or LA, where you're never going to get through a labor certification, or where the companies have so many applicants that they're not willing to sponsor you. But instead, you might look in some other beautiful parts of the country, like, you know, Idaho or Ohio or upstate New York, for example, where employers are desperate. They're desperate to get people of really high caliber with great degrees that these foreign nationals have. And I've seen employers bend over backwards for foreign nationals if they're willing to be a little bit more creative with where they go. But if, on the other hand, you're concerned, you know, some careers, if you go outside of the New York City or LA track, you've sort of thrown your career path off, right? And maybe you don't care so much whether you're in the United States for your whole career. Maybe you want to go back to, you know, wherever it is. Maybe you have a great career in China or in Singapore or in India or wherever it is, and you're willing to go back there. Then your whole immigration strategy is very, very different, right? So that's really, I think, the crux, because if you can make that decision up front about your priorities, everything else falls into place, right? And so if it's, you know, you're going to be in the US no matter what, you're going to be a little bit more resilient through those RFEs, which are inevitably going to come in the L1 or in the H1B or wherever it is these days. It's really, RFEs are everywhere right now, right? So that's really, I think, what's critical to be able to get through this culture in immigration that we're dealing with right now.
You made such an important point about the students. I wish every incoming student would go through a consultation with an attorney coming in. Because so many times that happen when they're about to graduate and they're just thinking about OPT then or what they're going to do. They could have potentially done an E2, but they ran out of time because maybe the OPT is running out. Or they got a job, they were STEM, but the job is not E-verified, so they can't get the full STEM extension. and they had the opportunity to have a job that was, you know, STEM extensionable, but they just chose another one. So it's like, you got to understand these nuances of how it works, and the sooner you start, the better. I can't count how many times I'm next to a lot of colleges, and they come here and they went to the orientation and the PowerPoints for their international department, but they weren't paying attention. And just now, last second, they're like, oh, I didn't file OPT in time, or my OPT is ending. What do I do next? I'm like, well, maybe we could have done an E2. Maybe it could have been a self-employed E2 and built up a company. And if it worked, then did a change of status from F1 to E2 and made that work. There's some creative stuff you could do with these categories. So try to do it, but just more often than not, the students are just in too late. So they may have to leave, or they need a J1 2-year requirement waiver, and it's like last minute. And it's like, well, if we had requested the waiver sooner, you probably got it, and then you could have done some stuff, but now you got to go home and wait it out. And so there's all this kind of stuff. I just wish, students would get in sooner, or pay attention to this aspect before it's too late. They have a lot going on at first, but it's such a pivotal part, because a lot of them do come in with the idea they're going to go back, but also then a couple years later, they realize how much they enjoy America, how much fun they have, and then they change their mind. But as soon as possible, they need to talk with the lawyer and really sit down. And the nuances of the F1 student visa are so complicated that I intentionally didn't feel like learning it, because it was like, I don't do H-1B, I don't do perm, so I'm not going to go down that track. But I have so many marriage cases, so many J-1 waivers and stuff that come up that I've had to read CFR 214.2B, F, or so whatever that regulation is, so many times just to clear out how OPT works, how you get emergency work permission for them, or this and that, and how CPT works with OPT. All this kind of stuff practitioners just have to know, because there's so many numbers of students here. Unfortunately, it's gone down because of the Trump administration, but it's still in the hundreds of thousands. So, and over the years, just adds up to millions of potential clients and applicants. So that's awesome. So you're right now with Miller Mayer, which is a great firm, and Stephen Allaire is of counsel there. He was very kind enough to always help me out since I first started. I remember the first time I had a question like 8 years ago. I just randomly found his email, and I emailed him, and he responded and gave me the answer. This is before
that sounds like Steve.
Yeah. Oh, that's nice. And then I try not to bombard him with too many emails, but he was kind enough. And then over the years, I would see him at different events, and we both professors, so I saw him at the AILA professor meeting every once in a while and stuff like that. But you're really active in the bar as well. At AILA, you're also liaison with the Vermont Service Center. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I am chairing the Vermont Service Center Liaison Committee this year. So we are working through, trying to maintain the relationships that we have. I think that the people at USCIS, they are the people that are there and have been there for their whole careers. They are trying, I think, really hard to do right by the law. Mm-hmm. I don't envy their position, but we still have good relationships, and basically what we do on liaison. So we have a committee, right, that receives anything that sort of went awry with respect to the Vermont Service Center, right, or at least that the attorney is worried about. And so our mission is sort of twofold. One is to basically look at the issue, and if it's really that there's a policy that has existed, and it's impossible for any one attorney to know that every policy that comes out from USCIS, right? And if the adjudication is consistent with that policy, and we know that the government isn't necessarily going to, they're not going to change their mind based on that, because they've spent a very long time developing this policy. Then part of it is just sort of communication, right, and helping members understand where USCIS is on a particular issue. And sometimes that's also developing practice pointers and just understanding, basically how the service center is treating things right now. But the other is an advocacy portion, right? The other is if there's things that where something seems inconsistent with a policy, or if it looks like there's some new interpretation that we weren't expecting, or if there's something that just seems awry, we will contact the people in USCIS through the channels that USCIS has set up. Which have been changed in the last couple of years, but we respect the way that they do them, and they are responding in the way that they have said that they would, and we work through that path, and there are results that come of that. Usually we ask that people have gone through the whole escalation process first, because that's what the government is looking for. Honestly, they want the cases to have been vetted prior to escalation, and that's how it works. If you think about, I don't know if you're familiar with the H-1B. There's the shift in policy, right? And there was the RFE based on level 1 wages and all that sort of stuff. The impetus of that originally came through liaison and AILA's committees. In order to, so we started seeing reports of RFEs that just seemed completely different from RFEs that we had ever seen. And we were able to sort of develop the trends, or develop what the trends are at that point, and put together in conjunction with other AILA committees. And it wasn't just it obviously wasn't the Vermont Service Center, it was Service Center Operations, which is the SCOPS committee that was really spearheading this with some other committees. And that's where that practice pointer came from, was from people that are volunteering their time to help with liaison and the committees. So it's a job where we have to be somewhat diplomatic, right? Because we want to be able to help the government see the point of view of the attorney, and that's not always by that's not necessarily by being by bombarding the government, and we have to be a little bit
about it.
We have to be a little bit diplomatic in how we handle it, but we do see results, and it's another way that this can be very satisfying of a practice, because not only are you helping your own clients, but you're also helping attorneys help their clients. And that's really what it's about. I mean, it's AILA, right? So it's a professional bar association. So the goal is really to help lawyers. Yeah. And so that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to help lawyers. So that's how it works. And it can be difficult, right? It can be frustrating, but it is also very engaging. And again, you get that benefit of being able to help again, which I think drives a lot of immigration lawyers.
Have you been part of that committee for several years that you moved up to the chair position?
Yeah, so I've been part of this committee for, I guess, was it 3 or 4 years at this point? Mm-hmm. So I started as a member. I was 1 year just as an at-large member, and then I was moved up to vice chair, and I served as vice chair to Nicole Simon for 2 years. Nicole Simon practices in Pennsylvania. And then this last year, Nicole is now the vice chair of the SCOPS committee. So actually the BSC committee is technically a subcommittee of the Service Center Operations Liaison Committee, which is the actual, which is a full committee, right? So she is now the vice chair of that SCOPS committee, which is the overall committee. And so I was moved up to chair of the subcommittee on Vermont Service Center Liaison.
So Vermont, I think, handles the U's and the VAWA claims. Is that where
Yes, it does. And so we always get somebody on the committee that does that in particular. Yeah. So we always have somebody that's a specialist in that, because, that's a very specialized practice, right? Mm-hmm. So as the chair, I rely on that person heavily when something comes up that's related to VAWA and U's and all that stuff.
I haven't done those cases in years, but I remember, like, for U's, I think I had to call like a separate phone number. There was a different system that we had to deal with because there was like confidentiality issues. I remember some peculiar thing. And then Vermont also does, I think they do L's and they do employment-based and all that kind of stuff as well. I remember VSC seeing them. I'm out of California. Usually I deal with California Service Center, and sometimes they transfer to Texas, but not as much Vermont anymore.
No one transfers to Vermont because for a while I think there was this impression that Vermont was the more generous service center, I guess is the diplomatic way to put it. So I think there was a lot of people, tried to get, their case.
Yeah, I remember those days. Yeah, people say try to get Vermont, but those days are over. It's all
well, a lot has been transferred out of Vermont. So the L's got transferred out about 1.5 years ago.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so but they still have H's. I think we get the TNs. There's some I-130s, but not a lot. But
maybe you can answer this. What is the way I-130s get distributed now? Because is there just where whoever has the bandwidth gets the I-130? Because I'll have U.S. citizen petitions that go to Texas, and they'll go to California Service Center. They go all over the place. And I used to have a consistency where I could say, okay, this is Service Center, this is timelines. Is it right now just because of bandwidth situation, things could go anywhere?
I think they're really, so the sense I get from USCIS is that they're really focused on trying to make the adjudication experience consistent, right? Because they have gotten complaints about people saying one service center is harder than the other and one service center adjudicates something different from the other. And that,
Yeah.
I mean, it's when you have a group of human beings, that's going to happen, right? So their goal, I think, is to try to make things consistent. And so they do move things around. And it really is based on staffing. If they try to have people, try to hire enough people to deal with the backlogs, for example. But they have to take people off from cases to train people, right? And so that slows things down even more. And then from what I understand, a lot of people like to eventually move out to field offices, and you can do that after a certain number of years of service at one of the service centers. And so once somebody transfers to a field office, well, then you have to bring more people into the service center, and it starts the cycle again.
Yeah.
So, just based on staffing and based on building size and all that sort of stuff, they tend to move things around, right? I don't know all the inner workings, to be honest, and I can't speak to some of the concerns about the wait times, and so just because I'm not part of that organization, I can only speak to what we've learned in the past, through when we used to have in-person interactions.
Yeah, and I have some sympathy towards the officers going through. One is like, this is immigration. There's parts of immigration that there is no precedent or law. We kind of, all of us have to make it up as we go along, and then hopefully some judge makes a decision, lets us know what's going on. And then it's so hard to learn this stuff. So to go through training for an L1, for example, you got to go through just the experience of going through L1's multiples and seeing the nuanced stuff before you can learn it. So it takes so much time to train and then experience to actually do them right. So there's going to be mistakes, and I can't really blame the officer because, it takes so many lawyers make mistakes on L's until they figure it out, just because there's like 8 different things that have to be perfect for it to go through. And
well, I think that's a critical point, right? And that's what when I talk to people that are just starting out in immigration, that's something I remind them that as a lawyer, I think part of the problem is in law school, you learn how to write a lot of litigation, legal briefs, and all of this other stuff. But the truth is that as a lawyer, your job is really to communicate. At its bare bones core of it is to communicate. And when you're dealing with a USCIS officer, you don't know if this is going to be somebody. There's no degree requirement to be a USCIS officer. So that's something to keep in mind too, right? There's no degree requirement, but you may have somebody that went to law school. There are law school graduates that serve as USCIS adjudicators. So if you're zealously trying to advocate for your client, right? That's the language, right?
Yeah.
You may have to communicate in ways that are less aren't the legal form, right? You may want to, for example, put a diagram in your application or petition.
Yeah.
You may have to spend a little bit of time on Wikipedia trying to understand what all these legal jargon terms mean, so that you can describe that. I wouldn't put Wikipedia in your petition. I don't think that's worked out too well for you. But just so for you to get a sense of what so for example, I mentioned mitral valve regurgitation at the top, right? If you don't know what that is when you're describing this letter, the adjudicator's not going to know what that is either, right? And so you want that adjudicator to be on your side to understand the way things work. So, it may be that you put the regulations in your petition so that they can actually see what the regulations say. They may not be aware of what the regulations say, right? They might not, this might be the first time they've ever looked at a case like this, right? And maybe maybe that shouldn't be, right? And I can't really speak to that, but I always assume that it's my job to, I'm a pragmatist at my core, right? So from a pragmatic standpoint, I want to communicate as best as I can to the government, not assuming that they're going to understand all of the technical expertise and minutia, but then also not selling them short. So you have to sort of straddle this line, because maybe they do understand all this stuff, and they do. Maybe they've been there for 10 years and they know, whatever category it is just as well as you do. So you don't want to necessarily dumb things down, but you do want to make sure that you're being communicative and thorough, so that so that
Yeah.
they're on your side.
Yeah, keep it simple, make it easy to understand, make it not bored. Because imagine like L's right now, these packages are so huge and they have 10 L's dumped on them. And
Hmm.
I can only imagine, like, I don't think I could do that job. Having to read through thousands of pages of L applications, that's going to wear me down. So I just want something that's clean, pretty, maybe has colors, maybe has charts. So it's just really easy. I could pick up on what's needed, has page numbers, so I could find the evidence that I need. I would just think, what would I do if someone dumped like 1,000 pages on me? And mentioning 1,000 pages for L's at this point, because we get RFEs on such annoying parts that I just have to overdo it. And at, for a long time, I was successful sending a 500 to 1,000 page L's. Within a couple of days, it would be approved. Recently, I've been getting pushback, and they've been asking for stuff that's in there. And I'm like, are they just asking because they want more time? Are they asking because they didn't read it? Or is it because there's so many pages I have to pump through this in this L just to make sure we're thorough, that they just can't even find it? Or they're tried for a little bit, then like, you know what? I'll just specifically ask for that one document so I can see it, because I have, 40 pages of Russian lease agreements with translation here. And then I have, 50 contracts that I'm going through that don't individually have any add that much to the application. But if I didn't include them, they'll say, oh, this business isn't doing business or it's not legit. I have bank statements like for 12 months when it's like, just all this extra stuff that I've gotten RFEs about that I pack into the L1 that just, it overwhelms them. So it's a hit and miss thing. But I think the cover letter, sometimes and everyone's probably done this, but you send an application and it gets returned to you because of some issue, the check wasn't there, wasn't signed or whatever, or went to the wrong address. And you see, like, they just tear things up, and they always put my cover letter at the last, like it's a totally worthless document. But I'm like, the cover letter is kind of like a guide to what's in there. I would imagine it's very helpful. So I never know if my cover letter is actually that helpful, but I think it is. It really just boils things down. And another thing, a tip I give is, I've just, at this point, I have after the check and the G28s, I have a cover that's like one page that my client writes that really just in 2 paragraphs breaks down every aspect of the L, just so they read that and they know what's going on, what the business is in layman terms, how the connections of companies, all this stuff in one page. And then the cover letter is more thorough, and then all the attachments and evidence and stuff, which is just weight, just weight of paper put in there. But just, I'm always thinking, how can I make this easier? EB1A is extraordinary ability as well. It's just, what is the method to make? Because they don't even give us good guidance on how they want it presented, what order necessarily. The whole issue with tabs has been complicated. Like if you have tabs on the right or left side of it, they tear that out. Some people are saying put tabs at the bottom, they'll keep those. But it's like maybe not. Some people put color dividers in between. I don't do that. I started stamping each page, and I put evidence, like this is a attachment 1, page 14. I just number them with attachment numbers and cite to it like that to hopefully just make it easier for them to find what they're looking for. But it would be good if there was some sort of system that could just make it uniform. But then again, each officer has their own preferences, so it just luck of the draw. And that's the frustrating part. It's such a inconsistent adjudication that happens because everyone's different, and there's no way to fix that because humanity is so different.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, you're dealing with people, right?
Yeah.
And so, and you're dealing with something that's run by a political office too, right? So, the opinions are going to change, and I think that's the value of an immigration lawyer, and that's what we do. We just try to navigate. It's a little bit. I don't know. It's a little bit contrite to say, but we have JDs, right? It's a doctorate, right? And it's, if you think of a medical doctorate as a doctor taking physical medical laws, trying to solve medical problems.
Mm-hmm.
As a JD, your job is to take social issues, social problems, and use the social laws, the social rules.
That's beautiful, yeah.
To fix those, right?
Yeah.
That's what we're doing. And so it takes creativity, it takes resilience, and it takes dealing with things that are going to get you really frustrated. And maybe you can take that out in a lawsuit someday if it rises to the need of a mandamus or whatever it is. But I think the strength of a lawyer is in being able to see past that and be resilient and try to sort of roll with the punches and help your clients. And in immigration, your clients are already really stressed out as it is, right? They're nervous, their jobs, their careers, their livelihoods are on the line with this. And so you're sort of taking a lot on yourself as a lawyer, But dealing with that emotion and being empathetic to that emotion while also being good and being able to, understand the rules and present them in a way that that USCIS needs to agree with, that they understand, okay, this is how it ought to be. And again, because you're dealing with people, sometimes that won't work out. I think if an immigration lawyer tells you they've never had a denial, I would audit that. I'd be a little skeptical of that. But it requires that idea of really being willing to help people and work with people and trying to solve those social issues that your clients are facing.
Yeah, he said it. I think we get caught up in law school and in the TV shows that we see that lawyer is this person that wears a suit and goes and argues in court, but really we're just creative communicators. We're using as you said, all these terms that you use, these social laws and social tools we have to just communicate someone's argument. And sometimes you have cases that they don't have good evidence, but if you communicate well what the situation is, or for national interest waiver, you communicate how the importance of this work to national interest is, it works. It's just letting people know, and person to person, like, this is a situation, this person like this, and just make it easy for the other person to understand and empathize, and it works. We have to really think outside the box, not just looking at the INA or the CFR or like Form I-129 or whatever. It's really like, how could I, take this information, send it to someone. Sometimes you need to have pictures, or sometimes you need to have whatever you need just to help communicate what you need, and that could get me the approval. We might not have much evidence, but in totality, it'll work. And so that's what always keep in mind. Whatever creative way you can think about, it doesn't have to be lawsuits or forms. It'd be so many different ways. It could be outreach to the press. It could be a simple letter to the officer explaining stuff. It's just different ways of doing it. And when I have cases that I'm like just stuck on, I just go and think like, what else can I do to help, communicate and get this person his message out there. It's kind of like a PR agent a lot, especially when you're dealing with extraordinary ability stuff. It's PR, public relations, and all that. It's not even, CFR, INA, this and that. But it's such an interesting job. So what is your, where you work right now, what is your position? Do you have a team of people helping you? How do you operate in your firm?
Yeah, so I'm senior counsel, which basically is a fancy way of saying senior associate, right? So it's a firm. It's big for immigration, but it's a smaller firm generally. It's a general practice firm, and so we have 20 attorneys. I believe it's 9 or 10 of which are immigration attorneys, and it's owned by partners, and so there is a track that you would go on as an associate to hopefully someday be able to buy into the firm as a partner. I work with, we call them immigration assistants, but essentially paralegals and administrative staff. And so we work as a team to try to basically help people get approvals, right? And so we are built for volume as well as individualized matters. We try very hard to give people a very personalized experience. So while, yes, I mean, the nature of immigration is that you have to have a lot of cases in order to have a viable practice just from a financial standpoint, we don't want people to feel like that. We don't want people to feel like they're one of 100 or whatever clients, right? We want people to feel like they're important. And so we strive very hard, whether it's through us as the attorney or through the paralegal or through whoever it is, to really try to connect with people and to make people feel heard and that we're constantly working on their side, because we are monitoring their case. We invest in technology to help us make sure that we're staying on top of things. We reach out with webinars, right? So we've had a number of webinars. We try different methods of communication in order to help clients really succeed. So again, it gets back to that creativity standpoint. Our goal is really to provide the best service that we possibly can. I think where Miller Mayer made its name is in the EB-5 practice, right? So that's where somebody invests $500,000 or $1 million in the U.S., it's going to go up in November to $900,000 and $1.8 million.
Yeah.
So we actually do have a partner that lives in Vietnam right now, and so he's in Asia working with people over there, and I think that brings a great perspective. It allows us to have, a even closer connection to some of our clients that are from Asia, because we have somebody over there that's really involved, that's really connecting with the culture. So I really like working here.
Yeah.
It's been a great place for me to work. I love Ithaca. I went to law school here, but coming back with my kids and my wife, it's been an awesome experience. It's a great little town, little city. Finger Lakes are amazing. So it's just, from my standpoint, it's a great place to live and a great place to work.
What, are you seeing a mad dash towards investors coming in with the increase in late September, early October?
So this is, the regulations are fairly new, right? They came out just last week. So it takes a while, I think, to invest $500,000, right?
Yeah.
So the expectation is that there will be some movement in that regard, but we'll know when we know.
Yeah. So what drove you to start a podcast?
So it's interesting, right? So so Miller Mayer was playing with the idea of starting a podcast, and my family actually has a production company, right? So they were talking, and then it came about that Miller Mayer kind of wanted to test the water to see if a podcast was viable, and my dad, who runs the production company, was willing to let me try to start a podcast, and so Miller Mayer basically said, "Yeah, you go ahead and start it." Right. So that left me, with their support. I don't want to say they just left me out there, but that left me to basically create something. Right. So I had to kind of figure out what I wanted to create, and I've always been somewhat interested in podcasts. Right. I mean, I know you have a great podcast that's been around for a couple of years. There's a lot of great things out there. Right. Love listening to things like Radio Lab and all those great podcasts out there. And so it gave me this opportunity to sort of reflect on what I'm looking to do. And one thing that I have been very concerned about is just sort of this dehumanization that's happening in culture generally, where people aren't talking to each other. And so I wanted to create something that would facilitate conversation, right? And so part of that, and obviously it had to be in the context of immigration, part of it, and I'm sure you face this too, is that people just don't know what an immigration lawyer does, and they don't understand how immigration works. The first question I talk about on my podcast is, how do you practice immigration law in Ithaca, right? Because people are kind of shocked that, here I am in Ithaca. It's a town, I think, of 30,000. I mean, it's not LA by any stretch of the imagination, right? And yet I have a full, busy practice, right? How does that work, right? How does that happen? And it gets to a misunderstanding of how immigration law actually works. And so my goal with the podcast isn't necessarily to tell people how to think, although my opinion certainly comes across, I think, right? I don't make any claim to not having, an opinion about how things work. But really what my goal is essentially to demystify immigration, to explain how it works, not so much to the attorney as it is to just the everyday person, right? And how does it affect their everyday life? And so that's where the title Everyday Immigration came from. It's not that I have any intention of ever putting out content every day. I think I would die if I did that. But it's, how does this affect us in our everyday life? Because I think people miss that it really does. I mean, when you go to work for a new employer, you're filling out an I-9. That's an immigration form, right? When you have a professor that was born in Singapore or in India or in Nigeria, that person had to go through an immense immigration process to be able to teach that expertise that they have to you. When you have a coworker that wasn't born in the United States, they've probably had to go through a very difficult process. And so I think a lot of the problem right now is that we have opinions about things that we don't know anything about, or at least we know very little about. And so my hope isn't to necessarily tell people what to think, so much as it is to have better opinions, have more informed opinions, because I don't claim to be able to know the best solution, right? I wouldn't, if you gave me the immigration system right now and said, create something, certainly I would probably build something that's favorable to my practice just as a human being. But being able to balance that balancing act between, protecting U.S. workers and still bringing in innovation that's going to create new jobs for U.S. workers, while recognizing that, we are very poor judges of what what talent is, and
Yeah.
who is going to contribute meaningfully to society, whatever that means, right? So maybe that is somebody that comes through as a refugee, or through family, or maybe they're even undocumented, right? And
Mhm.
they went through all the steps that you needed to go through in order to have lawful status in the United States. You know, it's a very difficult thing that we've put on Congress, and that's probably why they
Yeah.
haven't updated the laws in however many decades, right? So my goal isn't necessarily to tell people this is what the policy ought to be, so much as this is what's going on right now. This is how things actually work. And so hopefully now, after listening to how things are actually working and how it affects people, right? That's really what I want to show,
Mhm.
is how this affects individual people. Now you can make hopefully a better decision about how you support these things. Now you can make a better decision about what you believe in immigration, right? If you're, the first person I had on, and this was intentional, was an American citizen who was bringing over a Western European, uh, a British husband to the United States. And it's shocking to, I think, most people when they listen to it the first time, to hear all the steps that an American woman had to go through to bring in somebody from Britain, the country that we're supposed to be closest to, right? Um, and yet, even still, through the marriage-based process, which is the easiest immigration process there is, it was a multi-year, multi-step,
Yeah.
difficult process that they had to go through. And I don't think people always understand that. I don't know if you've had this experience, but every time a U.S. citizen comes into my office, not every time, but a lot of times when U.S. citizens come into my office and they're trying to help their friend, they're blown away
Yeah.
by all of the steps that this person has to go through, or that there isn't really a path forward for this person,
Yeah.
um, because they've never even experienced it, right? And I don't hold that against anybody. There's a lot of things that I don't understand, and I have blind spots all over the place,
Yeah.
and so I'm sure I also have uninformed
Yeah,
opinions.
I was
But go
natural
ahead.
U.S. citizen. Yeah, and like until I got into it, I just didn't even think about it. And I think that's the nature of most citizens. They don't know. And what's important about what you're doing is it's very important to like just let people know that it is like this, because and it takes away from their simplistic understanding of get in line or wait your turn. This stuff that doesn't mean anything when you look at the all the issues. There's
Yeah,
no
I mean, they have visions of Ellis Island, and Ellis Island is a museum, right?
yeah.
It's not that you just have to come in and show that you are a healthy person, right? It's a multi-year, multi-step, very difficult process that you have to go through, where you're going to have to make sacrifices, and thank goodness there are people that are willing to go through those sacrifices, because we as a country have really netted the benefit of some amazing accomplishments that were created by immigrants. And that's not to say that U.S. citizens haven't done amazing things as well. Obviously, they have. I mean, that goes without saying. But we have been enriched by a lot of great accomplishments that have come in, because we've been a society that has said, what we consider a nation isn't a group of people of the same heritage. Our nation is people that subscribe to the same ideals.
Yeah.
And if you're willing to subscribe to these ideals, you get to be an American. And we've borne the benefit of that, because people have been willing to subscribe to what we want to be. Maybe not what we have been, but what we want to be.
Yeah, well put, well put. That is it. I mean, you should run for office.
Yeah, I don't know that an immigration lawyer would do too well.
No, way too much hate mail and hate come out.
Yeah.
So that's wonderful. What direction are you just going in your career? So are you planning on continuing with the firm, or would you like to get in more media kind of stuff, or just kind of play day by day? I know you have a family. How many kids do you have?
Well, so we actually have 4. We never
Oh
planned to
wow.
have 4, but we have, the last 2 are twins, so
Oh.
that was a surprise. We love them. I have 4 daughters. They're awesome.
Oh wow. What are the
Yeah.
age ranges?
So 7, 5, and 9 months. So
Wow, 9 months, twins. Woo.
yeah, what a time to start a podcast, right? I have a
Yeah.
very, very patient wife. Yeah, she also has ownership of the podcast, by the way. So,
Oh
so
yeah.
just to be clear, we're trying to be fair
Is
with.
she an attorney as well?
No,
With a
she's a music
production company?
teacher.
Me too.
So
Okay.
yeah, so she taught music for many, many years down in Pennsylvania. Actually, a lot of our dates when I was in law school were to high school football games, because she had to run the marching band.
Oh, that's
So
neat.
yeah, so it was this whole world that I didn't even know.
How
But
is it? Because my wife, we're gonna have our second child in about 2 months, and I already know like I could handle the first 4 or 5 months of not sleeping, but then I remember last time for that I was losing my mind. How are you on the sleep and stuff right now?
sleep is good. Sleep is good. I mean, honestly, it's client work that cuts into my sleep more than anything, which is as it should be. These twins have been awesome. All my kids
Wonderful.
have been awesome, but they sleep through the night now. I know I'm very lucky with that. But yeah, they've been great, and I do. I don't want to scare you, but going from 1 to 2, I think was a bigger shock than 2 to 4.
Yeah.
Not that 2 to 4 was easy. But I think the funniest thing about having twins was we expected, on TV, they like sit the couple down and say, just so you know, it's twins, right? And they give you
Yeah.
time to process this. We sat down, the person put the ultrasound wand on my wife and said, oh, and it's twins. And we thought, honestly, they had the wrong chart, because it was just so matter of fact. And honestly, I've been told I was white the entire day, like
Yeah.
just I mean, I'm pretty pale as it is, but I was apparently paler uh, for that entire day. But anyway, it's a whirlwind. It's a roller coaster, but it's awesome.
Yeah, my wife has a lot of twins in her family, and we were expecting twins the first time around, and I was really happy about it. But after I had my first son, which is he's wild, I was dreading the second one. Like, please God, don't let it be twins. I can't handle this. So we'll
Yeah,
see. We're gonna go for a third one, and then we'll play around the fourth. We're probably gonna have twins by then, because every level of her family for a long time has been twins, so
yeah.
it's inevitable for us.
There are no twins in my family.
Oh, really?
These are identical twins, right? So fraternal twins runs in the family. Identical twins does not. So this was just, we happened to be the 1 in 200 couples that happened to have identical twins. So lucky us. I mean, lucky us. I mean, honestly,
Yeah.
lucky us. Yeah.
It's just a lot of work, but I mean, your family lives all close by, so that helps out. I guess your family all lives around Ithaca as well, northern New York.
So we're kind of spread out these days. So I've got my family is in the Albany area, which is great. My wife's family is in the Scranton, Pennsylvania area. Um, Her siblings, she's got some that are in Pennsylvania, some that are in Arizona, and then my siblings are sort of spread out. I've got a
Oh, okay.
brother in Pennsylvania, a sister in Georgia, and a little brother who's all the way out in Utah right now.
Wow.
So they're all over the place. But
I've brought all our family together, so there's always somebody watching over a kid, because my sister had a kid too, and so I have
yeah,
our mom's
that's gotta be
here.
pretty
Yeah.
nice. Yeah.
That's all fun.
Then you might, if your family's all right there, able to watch the kids, you'll be fine.
Yeah, but my first kid again is so crazy. It like takes like 4 of us sometimes just running after him, nonstop energy. I'm like, how does he do it? I was never like that. I was always just sitting there watching stuff. But I wanted to have that energy. It's good to be like that free spirit kind of stuff. But it wears you out, man. So I'm going to see how the second one goes. If it's another one of those, I'm like, maybe 2 is enough. But 3 to 4 is my goal. I'd love to have more kids. It's a real blessing having that kind of energy and joy and happiness that the kids have in this
Yeah,
experience.
they're great, and they're unbelievable. They're so smart too.
Yeah.
Like you can't really underestimate kids, because
Mm-hmm.
they pick up on more than you think that they do.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, nothing has made me a better lawyer than having kids. I mean, honestly, not to compare clients to children at all, but just the amount of resilience and
Mm-hmm.
patience that you gain by dealing
In
with
immigration law itself, you got to,
responsibility.
yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, that the responsibility isn't quite the same, but it does translate some to that responsibility you feel for your clients, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they're, especially in immigration, their lives are on the line
Yeah.
in so many ways, and so getting used to that responsibility and that concern through the parenting standpoint really does help you deal with that, I think, in a professional standpoint as well.
Yeah, you said the responsibility of the immigration lawyer is a heavy burden. And I see
Yeah,
some lawyers could ease up. I've gotten better now because I'm a better immigration attorney than when I started. At first, it was just so much stress of, am I doing the wrong thing? Am I doing the right thing? That stress is alleviated, but still, whenever I take on a case, I just, it's like having a kid and someone's life's in your hand, because they might have made $1 million investment and they'll lose it all and have to go back home because their
yeah,
investment has to be at risk at an E2 or EB5. And they waited 5 years for a visa category to come current, and then something at adjustment or consular processing doesn't go right. So it weighs heavily on me. That's one of the positive and negative factors of being an immigration attorney. There's a joy that comes with that, because when it works, you really did something. But when it doesn't work, even if it's not your fault, which a lot of times it isn't, it's just the nature of this ongoing. I mean, look at the travel ban. I have couples right now waiting 3 years to see each other, and I've been pleading with everybody, and because like the clients are hesitant about suing, going in the media. So I even started calling up and down the call directory of State Department, just trying to get a hold of somebody just to say, listen, you might have some of your family has MS. You know how hard it is. This woman's got it and she's pregnant. Please, like, do something. Just let this one slide. Or not slide. It's just finish the background check every 3 years. That's all I'm asking. Yeah, give him the waiver, let him come. And every time I talk with them, I'm like thinking, what kind of creative way could I get it? Because I think if we go to the press, it'll be good because the story is so heart-wrenching. But they're shy about going in the news about their condition, all this kind of stuff. But I think the press would be the best way to put pressure in, so people know like these are the kind of people that are getting hit. It's not terrorists. There's really. Yeah. I was talking with a prosecutor who prosecutes terrorist cases for the Justice Department, and I asked him, "Are there any Iranian terrorists?" He's like, "No, we've never prosecuted Iran. Just one guy who was selling some information and stuff like that, but it was just about making money." Usually the terrorists are from the countries that are not on the trial ban list. Exclusively, it's the ones that are on trial ban list. Very rarely, if ever, have terrorism issues. It's the ones that are not on the trial ban list. And they're the countries that the U.S. gives money support to, training support to. I mean, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, those are the countries that attack us. And so it's such an unfortunate thing that they have to go through this stuff, but that's politics for you. That's a whole conversation for another time. But David, thank you so much for coming on the show. Is there anything you would like to say extra, or best ways for people to reach out to you and learn about you and your podcast? Please let me know.
Yeah. So you can reach us if you type in everydayimmigration.com with no www before it. I don't know why the www before it doesn't work. There's something about the internet. If you type in everydayimmigration.com, that'll redirect you to the production site, which
that stress you out when you realize that's it. You're like, why is this not working?
It doesn't make any sense to me, but someday I'll figure it out.
I had the SSL certificate for my website expire a couple days ago, and then I didn't notice it because I don't go to my website often, but I punched it in and it wouldn't go. It said, "This is unsecure website. It'll get steal your information."
Yeah. We got a little bit of that at the beginning too.
Yeah, it's so annoying. Why
you have to learn all sorts of weird tech stuff. The easiest is actually if you go to Lee and So Productions or Frosted Lens Productions. So if you go LIONCEAU Productions.com. We're actually going to be moving over to Frosted Lens here soon, which is just how it sounds, frostedlens.com. So we'll be doing that in the future. But if you just search Everyday Immigration Podcast on whatever platform you like, you can listen to us. We're available on iTunes, on Spotify, on Google Podcasts.
Awesome.
And feel free to listen in. We're actually going to have John on ours. So this is a little bit of a crossover, podcast as well. So that'll be that. We're looking forward to doing that. And we'll find a time to get that up and running. But we try to run the first and third weekends of every month. We do 30-minute episodes. Eventually, hopefully, we'll reach the levels of the Immigration Lawyers podcast and have video and all the rest. But we're excited. We're having fun. We have 3 episodes out so far, and we invite anybody to join us for the ride.
Wonderful. It is a marathon, so don't it's not spread, because a lot of people get into this game, get burned out because of the work, but just stick with it. The key is liking it, what you do, and I can tell you enjoy it, so it's going to keep going. But thanks so much for coming on. Is there anything else? There's so much more we could talk about, but I think an hour conversation for this time. We'll definitely follow up. Maybe do it next year. Follow up what we've learned since in this year of podcasting and immigration. That'd be fun to talk.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
All right, David. Thank you so much. It was good seeing you, and we'll be in touch.
Sounds great.
Bye-bye.
Bye.